Oh, good. One coffee. Yeah.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
The best to you each morning. KELLOW.
I think we went to, did we go to like verse 25, I think, in chapter 18?
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
That's where we ended. Right.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, it is the joy of life that we're hearing.
Yes.
It is beautiful. At the end here, from 21 until 25, so it's talking about nachala. The term nachala is like a portion or an inheritance. Every tribe has a portion in the land of Israel. That is land which is going to provide them with their sustenance. Levi, the tribe of Levi, is not going to get land in the land of Israel. So in verse 23, for instance, it says, they will not lo yinchalu nachala. At the very last three words, lo yinchalu nachala. So they are not going to get landed like land. They're not going to get that kind of inheritance. Rather, what is going to be their nachala? It is going to be the tithe. So they are going to get a tithe from the people of Israel, which they will bring up to God as a gift. That nasati l'levim lanachala. That's what they're going to get as their inheritance. And then it says again, therefore I said to them, amongst Israel you will not get an inheritance, but rather you're going to, this tithe is going to be your inheritance. So there seem to be 2 points being made here. One is they're not getting land as a nachala, but they're getting the tithe as a nachala. Their tithe is not going to be amongst the people of Israel. Their portion is not going to be amongst the portions of Israel. but they are getting a portion. So first of all, what does it mean to call the tithe a nachala? And so you could say that how does the land work? What is it about the land? So the land is apportioned to each tribe. The tribe uniquely gets land. And then the families within the tribe get this land, and this land stays with the family. So what does it mean? What is the point of having land? What is the goal for having land?
Well, if you have land,
Sure.
you can yourself,
There you go.
place to live.
Right. So the land has two. Typically, when we speak of land nowadays, we think of a place to live. But in those times, land wasn't just a place to live.
Like a farm.
It was like a farm. It was like to be productive. So again, go back to that original condition of the human being. The original condition of the human being was to be a gardener. Now, they were a gardener in it's sort of an interesting situation. The garden is not theirs, really.
No.
The garden is God's.
Yeah.
It's God's garden. They're working as God's gardener. But they are told that they are going to they'll be able to eat of the produce of that garden, but they're sort of like God's garden. Now you go forward to the land of Israel, and in the land of Israel, they are getting land. And let's assume that a big part of the reason why they have this land is to produce. So who are they producing for? Who are they producing for? So just when you look at the end product, they are primarily producing for themselves. They are giving gifts from what they've produced. And you could even say they're giving the first of it, or maybe they're giving the best of it to as a kind of gift to God. They give it in the form of the first fruits that they bring to the temple. They give it they give it to the Kohen and to the Levi, and sometimes they're giving it to the poor. They're giving of it to the poor. But the primary beneficiary of this is themselves. So if you had asked them, what is the end goal of your farming? The end goal of your farming is to support yourself, to supply yourself. In that way, you could say that a regular stipend, if you're getting a regular stipend, if the goal of the inheritance is to support yourself, so then you could refer to a kind of regular stipend, which is what the Levim are getting. The Levites are getting a stipend. So you could say that stipend is parallel to having land. In fact, you could say that it is in some ways better because they're getting it. They don't have to do the work. So in that way, you could see the stipend and the land as kind of parallel. With the land, it's a two-step process. With the stipend, it's a direct process, but the end result is the same. In that regard, there are some qualitative differences between the two, which is that with the with the landowner, they have a kind of natural right to the produce. It is true that they have to work to get the results, but it is their natural right. They have some kind of natural connection to the source of it with the, and they can feel a kind of ownership, a sense of ownership. Where because with land, we saw there is this kind of connection like there is with an object. There's a psychological bond between the person and the land, the object, that you're an owner. There's a kind of dignity when you own things. You're in some sense like the master of it. And with the land, there is dignity that comes along with the land. There's station that comes with the land. There's a kind of dignity that comes with it. Again, if your goal is the end product, there's uncertainty because the land has to end up producing, and you're not guaranteed the land will produce. That's the anxiety that's promised in the curse, that that you're going to earn your bread by the sweat of your brow, and it's not going to reliably produce. So there's dignity, but there's also uncertainty. With a gift that's given to the Levi, there isn't dignity. This is not dignity. You are getting it, and in some ways it's more guaranteed in that a particular piece of land does not have to produce. If you don't get it from this guy, you could get it from that guy, etc. So maybe there's less uncertainty, but there isn't dignity, there isn't mastery, there isn't ownership. There's just a kind of right to something. So they have a parallel in that the end product is going to be the same, but how you get there is much different. And you could see that the experience would or could do something different to each person. There's like a different road to that end product, which could mold a kind of, or help to mold a different kind of character in each one. The other thing you don't have is you don't have a guaranteed place to live. Hi, hey Len. So you don't have a guaranteed place to live. That eventually they are going to have cities. What they are told that there will be cities that will be like Levite cities. So there will be cities set aside for the Levites in general. There won't be, their particular family is not going to be guaranteed a particular place. There will end up being housing for them, and they're going to have to sort of figure that out.
Yeah, because they don't have land, there's no large, tall apartment buildings.
Right, and there's no a particular apartment that they're assured of having.
So are they dependent on the tribe to build? I'm trying to picture how they're living this way.
Right. How do they? They are zoned, like we saw this in the Torah portion of Bahar. Which was towards the end of Vayikra. The Torah portion of Bahar, which is, so in Leviticus, it's like in chapters 20. So
9,
20.
yeah.
Where's it?
Says Levite cities.
Where is it? What chapter?
29. 25, 29.
Yeah. So So
or 30
tribe,
around the, yeah.
right? So
Mm-hmm. The homes in the open towns, they'll be.
yeah. So in verse
32.
32, Va'are halavim, there will be cities for Levites, Bote are achuzato. So they do, once they have, it does seem like once they're living in a particular house in the town, they have rights to that house. So it's not left to their family in particular, but once they take possession of a house, then they have certain hereditary rights to the house or the apartment, whatever we're going to call it. So, but it refers to as it says here, Kibote are halavim, the houses of the cities of the Levites is their inheritance amongst the people of Israel. And even the fields around the town, the fields around the towns are property of the Levites.
Really?
So this would need to be, this would require further elucidation, because in our parsha it says they don't have a nachala. B'tol Bnei Israel lo yinchalu nachala. And here in Bahar, it is saying that those cities are their inheritance. So it's using achuzah. It doesn't use the same word nachala, but it does use the word achuzah, which is a synonym. And it's an achuzah olam. So it's something that they hold. Yeah, so what? Yeah, so that needs to be further elucidated. What is the difference between a nachala and an achuzah? Well, one thing you could say is eventually the land that is that goes to the tribes eventually goes to a family. This land is guaranteed to the tribe, but not to a particular family. Although once a family inherits like an apartment or a house there, they do get to keep that. Even like in the Yovel, it should go back to them. There are some differences, but still. All right, so that needs more elucidation. Right now, I don't know how to entirely distinguish between these two. Within the towns, those towns themselves are always going to be theirs. And within the town, if somebody gets a house or an apartment, they get to keep it as a kind of inheritance. So, and it's called an achuzah, but not a nachala. And somehow, those two words, it uses, even in verse 46, it does use the word vis nachaltem otam livnechem. You can give it as a nachala to your children, their children after them. They can give it to them achuzah le'olam, as a achuzah forever.
Yeah.
It needs further elucidation. What the difference between those is, it sounds very much the same. It sounds like they are getting something that is the same. But I guess the distinction here is they're getting a living space, but they're not getting a farm.
They're not getting land.
Right, they're not getting land.
They're in a walled city.
Right. So we were saying there's two aspects to owning property. One is that you have a living space, and the other one is you have land to farm. So in the cities, you're not getting within the city, you're not getting land to farm. Although there is farmland outside the city, which does belong to the Levites. But it may be only belong to the Levites collectively. It may not belong to the Levites.
Can't.
But
Okay, I'll call you later.
Maybe it doesn't belong to them privately. There's something called a migrash that's also described in Bahar, in Leviticus, that there's an area outside the city. Yeah. There is this. There is property outside the city that still belongs to the Levim. Maybe they don't get it as part of the family. All right, that needs to be clarified. So now when we were comparing and contrasting Bereshit, where the human is the gardener for God, we also saw this in that area of the Chukosai, where God says, the people of Israel are my servants. They are my servants. So being productive in the land of Israel, I was suggesting at the time, does fit the model that even the land of Israel is really God's garden.
Right.
And we're his servants in the garden. It's just that when you look at how it plays out, for the most part, you're keeping like 88% or 80%, let's say. By the time you're finished, you're keeping about 80% of the agricultural produce, and about 20% is given up in taxes or gifts or whatever we'll call. So that means you're still the primary beneficiary of the work that's being done there, and you have the status of owner. So it doesn't look like you're primarily gardening for God. It looks like you're primarily gardening for yourself and paying taxes.
So are Levites basically tax collectors?
Well, the part of the taxes goes to them. I mean, they're not collecting it for others, Although
Well,
that's
they
true.
collect for themselves and then they have to tithe,
They
and I
do
don't know
give-
where those go to.
That's true. You are right. But the Kohen is getting it from two sources. The Kohen does get directly from the farmer,
Hmm.
and then the Kohen also collects from the Levite.
Hmm.
But also, like the second tithe, the Levite doesn't collect the second tithes. It doesn't collect when it's the tithe for the poor. It doesn't collect that. It worked out in the end that the Kohen was the tax collector, but that was in the Second Temple, and that was a corruption that happened, that they were also the tax collectors. They are the tax beneficiaries. They're government employees who are being paid by the taxes. And also in our text, it seems like they're actually, what's happening is we are facilitating a gift from God. We, the farmer. Because when we give it, as it says back in Bamidbar, in Numbers, in chapter 18, verse 24, it says, Yarimu lahashem truma, and then netati lalviim lanachala. You will lift it up as a elevation, and I am giving, I give, or the which I gave to the Levim as an inheritance, which it sounds like this is coming from God, not from the. So if you are an accountant, this money is actually coming from God's account. This is not coming from the farmer's account. The farmer's giving it to God, and God's giving it to the Levi. Yesterday in our Rambam class, the Nachmanides, we saw in that article about Nachmanides that Nachmanides was making this distinction, that he said, like, if a king asks you to give a gift to somebody else, the gift is from the king to the other person. It's not from you. If you're his servant and the king says, I want you to give from the treasury to that guy, the guy is getting the gift from the king. He's getting it from the king. He's not getting it from the servant. So that seems to be the accounting over here. The Levim are being supported by God, not by the farmers. The farmer,
That's what it sounds like.
right, the farmer is technically giving it, but the farmer is giving it on behalf of God. He's elevating it to God, and then this is considered a gift from God. So the Levim, as far as they're concerned, are being paid by God. And in that way, it parallels the the land that each tribe is getting, because each tribe is getting a portion from God, and the Levite gets his portion from God. The original gift of land is from God to the tribe, and then to these, the individuals in the tribe. And the tithe is a gift from God as well.
Well, the king, the analogy with the king and a government, if like someone is getting, let's say, welfare, I mean, the people are paying to the government. They're not paying to so the person is getting from the gift from the government, but it's actually the people who are
We're
giving.
Facilitating it. But
Right.
But in other words, but let's say I would say, I might say to a government, let's say to the mayor, you're working for me. I pay the money. Now, this is all how I frame it. The mayor might say, I'm not working for you. You don't pay me. You don't pay me. That's not your money. In other words, this is not your money. Your money, and so especially here, you'd have to say something like, you might say something like, it would depend how you tell this story, how you structure it, but you might say the following: when you live when you have land in the land of Israel, you have the land as a gift from God. Your land is a gift from God. Technically, you're God's servant, and you're in the hierarchy of things. God, it's God's land. La Shem haaretz umlo'ah. The land and all that fills it is God's. So technically, the land is God's. At His behest, you're living on the land, and you have
Pay rent.
right. You have certain rights to this land, but you're always on this land at God's behest. It always works out that way. And so, and
But you don't own the land.
well, in the big picture of it, you own it in as much as, there's, when you're talking to another person, in my relationship with other people, I call it, I own the land. But in the big picture of it, God really owns the land, let's say. God really owns the land. You're on the land as God's servant. And as part of the deal, you get the land, as yours. And you get, let's say, 80% of the produce, but 20% of it has to be given to other places. But when that 20% is given to other people, it's given on behalf of God.
Right.
It's not you didn't, this is not your gift to the other people, it's God's gift to the other people. And in the big picture, even what's given to you is from God. That's how you picture it.
So do you own the land?
So you own the land as far as the courts are concerned, but really God owns the land.
It goes to your heirs when you.
Right, but so it's like this with ownership of a lot of things. You own some. When I say let's say I say I own that house. So it is true that with regard to certain things, I own that house.
Right.
So, but not regard, that doesn't mean I can do just whatever I want in that house.
Once you default on taxes, which would be the tithe.
Right, they can
come and sell it out.
or there's something called the right of eminent domain, which means that they could take it away. They do have to compensate you for it, but they could take it away from you.
Right.
Plus, there's all sorts of zoning laws which restrict what you're allowed to do in that place. Plus, a lot of us think that we own it, even though we really share the ownership with a bank or something with other people. Let's say your house is on a historical registry, so there might be certain rules about what you're allowed to change on the outside of the house, etc. But I would still call it I own it, but that doesn't mean I own every right to it. So when I say I own something, there's always some caveat. There's always, more explanation is required. What rights do I actually have? There might be certain things which I have absolute rights in. There's really nothing anybody can tell me about what I'm allowed to do with it. Let's say I own a pet. I can't just do anything to that pet that I want.
No.
Right. So what it means that I have certain ownership rights, but it doesn't necessarily tell the whole story. So it could be that if I could say I own this house or I own this land, but what that means needs to be further explained. So in the big picture of the hierarchy, it could really be that God owns the land. We are servants on the land. We are granted the rights to 80% of the produce, the right to build a house on it, etc. We have the rights of inheritance, in other words, to give it as inheritance. But for instance, let's say, like you were saying about not paying your taxes, let's say I don't observe Shemitah. So we're told in the Torah, and then later on in the prophets, that if you don't keep the Shemitah, you're going to be thrown off the land. Oh, it's this land. This is not an absolute right to the land. You're going to eventually be thrown off the land. When we return to the land, let's say in the Second Commonwealth, where the Second Temple is concerned, people didn't go back to their ancestral homelands. The tribes didn't go back to tribal lands. People didn't go back to where their old houses were, and etc. There was an exile, and that seems to be it. There is some kind of promise that eventually the tribes will go back to their tribal land. On one of my first pastor's trips, we were at the Knesset, and there was a docent from the Knesset who was taking us around, and they mentioned that there's 120 members of the Knesset. So one of the pastors, he assumed that it was 10 for each tribe. This pastor is originally from Ghana. And it could be that was part of it, because the notion of tribal identity would have been consistent with tribal identity in Africa, in different African countries. But so he assumed that Jews today still organize according to tribes, that you would know what tribe you're from, and you would organize according to tribes in the land of Israel. And so he just made the assumption it was 10 members for each tribe, 120. And then she explained that no, and it was sort of funny she had to sort of catch up to it. No, but then she said that. Right, but you don't see that when there's descriptions of life in the second Beit HaMikdash, that people organize. I mean, you certainly knew who Kohanim and Levim were, because that you needed to know. But what if it didn't seem like there was any return to tribal lands or tribal identity for the other tribes.
Rabbi,
yeah.
Two things are occurring to me. It seems so strange that people in Israel today are trying to do as much of this kind of thing, as they can with Maser and everything. And yet the world is telling us this isn't really your land. I mean, that right. It's so weird in a way.
It's part of why in Israel there's such a disconnect with the general worldview. People have pointed this. I've even seen articles in newspapers where people are trying to explain that within Israel, the majority of the population are not seeing what happens in Gaza through the same lens that people outside of Israel are seeing it. That it's just there's this tremendous disconnect,
right,
between the view within Israel outward and the view from the outside looking at Israel.
Amazing.
Yeah, part of it that there is no question to people living in Israel about Jews' right to be there. And also you're no longer talking about a generation born in exile. If you're talking about a robust, vast majority that were born in Israel with the assumption that this is my land. Right. So
right.
Nor do they understand that people other than Jews live there. They have no clue that there is anyone else living in Israel but Jews.
The outside world.
The outside world.
Yeah, I know.
Like us,
also, I have a question.
Yeah,
Excuse me. What do we believe is God's relationship to the rest of Earth?
right. So we believe he created it. Um, we, I mean, again, if you go back to, if you start at the beginning, um, he he formed it, and he said it was good at each stage, and then he set up like middle management to manage it, as Rabbi Foreman likes to call it, including humans. But it seems like he put us here to, as part of the larger picture, which is Earth. That Earth, that that the creation of Earth was his goal. Or I mean, you could also say the universe. I don't know, some people, you could say the universe, but
But it
even
seems
the
that once
creation
he
story is
chooses
Earth.
this, yeah, it seems that once he chooses this land, he doesn't give a damn what's happening in the rest of the world.
No, no. He, I mean, he certainly he speaks of. But the thing is that you have the the Torah is not the handbook for the world. The Torah is a handbook for the Jewish people. What he thinks about the whole world, I mean, it might be details in the Torah if you're really looking with a magnifying glass, but the purpose of the Torah is not to explain his grand design. The purpose of the Torah is to be a guidebook for the Jewish people. Why are the Jewish people here? If you know, you could start to um, look deeper and try to get um, through deduction and induction and extrapolation, you could get to a world, a bigger view of the universe. But it's not the primary purpose of this to explain the big picture. The primary purpose of this is to be a guide for a particular people who are here. If you look back at the creation story, the creation story suggests that he had a broad purpose, of which the Jewish people are a subset of his big purpose. Humans are only part of the picture, and within humans you have the people of Israel who have a particular role. But if you look back at the role of humans in general, we were meant to manage a part of creation. We're meant to manage the fish, the birds, and the animals, and we're meant to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. And at some point, we're God's gardeners. You know, we've got a role to play. The fact that the Torah doesn't talk about the big picture over and over is because the Torah isn't given for that purpose. The Torah is given for a very specific purpose. To, I don't know, there was a garden and we're supposed to tend the garden. I assume it meant like other gardeners. That's when they were in the Garden of Eden. He said he put them there to work it and to guard it. So so that's what we are. We're sort of gardeners, and so again, you could extrapolate, just like you can from so many things. You could extrapolate to a big picture, but certainly the text isn't about the big picture. The fact that the Torah is not concerned about it is not an indication of what God values. It's not necessarily our role. If you got a handbook for, let's say you're the security guard at a facility and you got a handbook of how to be a security guard, there's going to be a lot of things that are not going to be discussed there. They may not even talk about the whole purpose for the company. Your job is to secure the building. Where if it's not your job, you don't necessarily have to know why this building is important. You just have to secure it.
Yeah, well, then you can kind of understand what Rashi was saying, when he said, why didn't he just start with
Yes,
yes?
yes, yeah. But the funny thing is his answer is so limited and narrow, and it doesn't include this. Like his answer is so that as a kind of that we have a right to the land, Even that sounds like a sort of afterthought, because this is going to come up when you're going out and doing your work. People are going to be annoyed that you're there, so just want you to know why you're there. But it's not necessarily, again, I know you can get the big picture from the details, just like you could understand a lot about the universe from a flower. If you could suddenly get to the subatomic world from a flower. And so there might be all sorts of things that you can learn from a flower about the broader universe, but
Grain of sand.
Yeah.
Like
yeah, yeah, we have
the universe in a grain of sand.
Right, but you need to know the big picture in order to do your job. No, your life could be very simple. It doesn't mean that your purpose is simple, but you don't even need to know your full purpose. You don't need to know why. If you go about and follow the basic rules for your life, all sorts of wonderful things will happen on all sorts of levels. Did you need to know that? Did you need to know, like when the Kabbalist describes the impact of one person's prayer on the universe? It can be mind blowing. But did I need to know that? No, I don't need to know that. I just need to, to say a simple prayer. And if I do that with sincerity, then whether I know what the ramifications are or I don't know what the ramifications are, it happens.
Then isn't it strange that the religions, Christianity, Islam especially, uses this book, which was just for this people, and then the whole religion all over the world with that? It's so strange.
Well, especially Christianity, I don't know what Islam.
Especially
it's very hard to see what Islam does with the Torah. They say they honor it, but I don't know what it means when they say that. They have very limited, it seems like, from my exposure to their connection to the Torah, it's not the same as the Christians.
Well, they talk about Ishmael and Hagar. Yeah. All right.
Yeah. They have their sort of own telling of these things. And
right.
I don't believe Muslims are at all encouraged to read the Bible. I don't think they're encouraged to read the Torah.
Right. Christianity, of course.
Right. Does. Yeah. So it is very strange. The whole phenomenon is very strange. It's born out of Judaism. It's like a weird thing born out of Judaism.
Yeah.
I agree. It's very strange. When I was on, again, referring back to those pastors' trips, the first pastor's trip I was on, there was a couple from Florida that learned the Torah with Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch's commentary, husband and wife. And they were asking me all sorts of questions because they, to explain what Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch means over here, what he means over there, and this word and that word, and what I think the meaning of it is. It also happened on my last trip. Interestingly, it was a Mormon guy who was fascinated by the meaning of certain words and really learning text from understanding the meaning of the words. It's very bizarre when you encounter that. It is a weird phenomenon, but it doesn't, from what we are exposed to in the Torah, it seems like there are perspectives of the universe Like even in the Midrash, when the angels are asking God, why are you giving the Torah to humans? Like you even get this sense that like there is a perspective where we're not that significant, or why would you give something this value to people? Right? Why are you giving the Torah to people that are not? Like it would be the equivalent of God deciding to give something to cockroaches. Like what? Like why are you giving it to cockroaches? But I was just having a conversation this last Shabbos with this young man who's been part of a group that I've studied with for several years. And I was suggesting that sometimes it's useful to change your perspective, to try a different perspective where you're not the center of the universe, because it can actually be good for your humility. So let's say you're a yeshiva bacher. As a yeshiva bacher, you're at the top of the hierarchy, because in your hierarchy, there's nothing more important than the human being in all of the universe. And there's nothing a human being can do that is of greater value than study Torah. So you're at the absolute pinnacle of the hierarchy. This is useful as motivation, but it's not useful when it comes to humility. What are the chances that you happen to be at the pinnacle of any hierarchy? It's such a slim thing. So try to view yourself as not the height of it. And also be a little bit suspicious. You're in yeshiva, and the curriculum of the yeshiva is telling you you're at the top of the hierarchy. Maybe if you weren't in yeshiva, you wouldn't be presented with yourself being at the top of this hierarchy. Maybe we're told in the Mishnah, in Pirkei Avos, that the world is built on three things: Torah, avoda, and gmilus chasadim. So what if you imagined that the hierarchy, at the top of the hierarchy, is gmilut chasadim, is kindness, is acts of kindness? Or what if at the top of the hierarchy is prayer? Then suddenly you have to catch up, because you're not the top of the heap, right? And so try imagining it that way. So he was resisting. He was resisting. But I've had this experience many times. I've tried it with my children and other students, and he's really resisting. And then it just so happens that we were learning before Rabbi Fox, the rabbi of our synagogue, was giving his class, and he was giving a class about tzedakah. His series of classes are about tzedakah. So he quoted the Lubavitch, the Alter Rebbe, the Reb Shneur Zalman of Liadi, as saying that there was a time when we considered the top of the hierarchy Torah, but now the top of hierarchy is tzedakah. So it was just funny, because he is suggesting this shift in the paradigm. And there are ways, just like there are ways of imagining yourself as the top of the heap, there are also ways of imagining yourself at the bottom of the heap. This is not useful if you have low self-esteem. If somebody has low self-esteem, it's not a useful exercise. But let's say your self-esteem is okay and you can take this. There are ways where you can draw up a scenario where you're not just not at the top, but that you're at the very bottom. So imagine a scenario where you're at the very bottom of the heap. I've done this before as a kind of meditation before I daven Shemona Esrei, where I'll imagine that I'm the very last person in line. There's billions of people in line, all according to a hierarchy of their value to the universe, and I imagine that I'm the very last person in line. I'm the very last person in line. I'm the least out of all the people in the universe. I'm the very last person, and then I daven Shemona Esrei from the position of last person. It was very wonderful experience, because I saw that it could still be meaningful even if I'm the last person, the least of all people. And again, it's just like you can picture yourself at the top, which we tend to try to do. You can picture yourself at the bottom. Just change the algorithm, change the way things are measured, change the way what is important, and then suddenly I'm the last person. And still, even as the last person, I could have value and meaning, and I could have God's ear. That was very, very invigorating. It was a very important experience, and it's especially useful, in this thing for humility. So you could say it about the Jewish people. I suggested this once to Rabbi Tantz. He didn't like it so much. He was resisting it, but I was suggesting, even if you take the model of a light unto the nations. Let's say we are described in some places as a light unto the nations. So as a light unto the nations, how do you imagine the scenario? So the nations need light. So God finds a light. What was his first priority? What was his first concern? The nations. The nations need a light. Let's say Philip of Macedon needs a teacher for Alexander, his son. So he goes out and he hires Aristotle. Now, Aristotle, why is he hiring Aristotle? Because Aristotle is Aristotle, right? So when Aristotle walks into the room, Alexander is told, you need to, I'm assuming, I don't know what Alexander's told because he is a prince, but he's your mentor. You have to show honor to your teacher. So he has to show honor to his teacher. But why is Aristotle there? Because of Alexander. Who's the most important person in the room at that moment? Alexander. Alexander needs to be educated. So I'm bringing in Aristotle. My primary concern is Alexander's education. Who's the most important person in the school? The student. But who gets the most honor? The teacher or the principal. But the principal's not the most important person in the school. The only reason there's a principal and a teacher is because those kids need to be educated. So the number one concern is the student. So if we are a light unto the nation, who is God's number one concern? The nations, not us. We're just being brought in to be a light unto the nations. So he was like pushing back, and he's going, let's just say we're like of equal concern. He was okay with equal concern. He didn't like it to express it that way, but you could do it, and it would bring humility. On the other hand, you don't want to lose the motivation and also the sense of mission. So you can't do it entirely, but you could go back and forth. It was suggested, somebody would have, he has two pockets, he has a note in each pocket. In one pocket, it says, you are the purpose of creation. And the other pocket, it says, you are the last thing to be created, or like so on the one hand, you are the most important. On the other hand, you are the least important, and each one has value, but it's useful to think of it in that sense. And it's very likely that in the universe we don't occupy, that we're a speck of dust in the universe, and when it comes to the purpose of the universe, we're a speck of dust. It's possible. And on the other hand, we're the most important part of the universe. That's also possible, and it would be valuable to go back and forth. Okay, so that thing clarifying this issue of inheritance for the Levium, that still needs some clarity. I'm very grateful for being able to learn today together. I look forward to doing it again next week. Be'ezrat Hashem yitbarach shemo.
Yes.
Be well.
Thank you. Thank
Have
you.
a good Shabbos.
Okay.
Lois,
Thank you, Rabbi.
All right. Be well, Estelle. Be well.